Okay, let's see how this connects to the Mixmaster and the aux effects up here. So we've got this just kind of playing here what I just recorded, and let's look at our cables. I usually keep the cables off because it just that's kind of cluttered and intense at first, but just so we can see. Um, I've got from my tangents, I've got that going out into the first input of my Mixmaster. Um, so this compared with, let's say, like the Mix 4 that we used before. So Mix 4 was great. We've got different inputs. We could pan it. Output would be left and right. So right off the bat, one of the first big differences is for the Mix 4, we can see each input is only a single, like a mono signal. So if we had something that was more of like stereo left-right, we'd have to do a kind of two inputs and then make sure like one is all the way left, one is all the way right, and then we can have this output left-right, which is fine. So essentially, if we wanted two different stereo signals, then okay, we've got like 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's it. What Mixmaster does for each of these channels, we can see it already has this like left and right, which is great. We've got CV input for volume control, CV input for panning, and then a nice little fader right here, and separate mute and solo buttons, which are great. So I'll just leave that like that. There we go. And then, from here, so if you don't have any of the aux things, so we just go out the main here, left and right, and that goes to our audio, as I have it right now. But I have all these effects. So how could I kind of play with that? I could do something like just go from main and connect this to the plateau, connect the next one, so have like a chain, right? And then for each of these, I kind of determine the dry and the wet. That will work, but the cool thing about using this aux expander, or using what's called auxiliary sends, these aux sends that we see right here, means we can kind of determine, according to each of our tracks here, each of our little strips, how much of that do we want to send, let's say, to the reverb. And also this is kind of great. We can have little labels, right? So I already kind of like name these according to what they are. So wind. So maybe my little vocal windy sound I sent through, I want to send a lot to the plateau. So I kind of boost this up, because if we look at this, okay, so aux A, I've got left and right here, so that is going to plateau, and then the out of plateau is going back to the aux return. So aux A return for left and right. So it's sending it out, it's coming back, and so we've got aux A, B, C, D here. So for my wind track, I'm saying, okay, send. If I did it all the way, that's like 100% of the volume. Send that to the reverb. This would be, maybe just a little bit. So it goes to that, comes back. So this becomes like another type of mixer. So we haven't really looked at these yet. But what if I wanted like a lot of hi-hat and just a little bit of my wind sound to go to reverb? So I can do that right there. If I had this kind of hooked up in that serial way before, I could control the dry and the wet here on our module, but I would not be able to control how much of each of these different sounds do I want to actually go into reverb. So that's the cool thing about these aux sends, that it gives you a lot of control, makes experimentation really easy. So let's hear the wind maybe with some of these effects. So I've got some good long reverb there, and so you might notice here I've got dry all the way down, and wet should be all the way up when we use effects as aux. So here too with the chrono blob, if all the way to the wet. So that's because I'm still hearing the dry signal from my normal channel here. So we're still hearing the dry signal completely. This is just controlling how much is going to get wet, right? How much is going to get that effect. And so if I had like dry here still, I'm kind of like adding even more to the full dry signal that I just have like over here, right? So like one small thing that's important. So for aux sends and returns, 0 dry, 100% wet is the way we should do it. So that sounds pretty good. So let's bring up, kind of play with chrono blob here. So I've got some modulation coming from Caudal. Again, like changing the left and right delay time. I've got the same value going in left and right because you could kind of hear what it sounds like if I do a different value. Whatever. Oops. So now left and right, and I opened up the attenuator here a little bit. Left and right now have different delay times, so that creates separation. So hold command, just copy that over so it's the same. Also, I have this loop gate input being triggered from another caudal output here. So if it's above 0 volts, that triggers. And you can see this little button lights up and turns off. So when that happens, whatever is being input, the sound that's being input to our chrono blob kind of gets held in perpetuity, like forever and ever, and it's going to keep looping and delaying that single audio sample. When you let it go, it kind of releases it and allows more audio to come in. So we can modulate all these things, but that's maybe enough. So other ones we haven't seen yet. So let's do flames. Right. So C. So aux C is going to flame here. Boost that up. Right. So it's really gnarly and distorted. We've got so blend. This is basically the dry wet. So I've got that all the way to wet. This has different models, which is really cool. Sounds like a cougar. God. So cylinder is the model. Right. So these models kind of just do slightly different effects to it. Pretty crazy. So this is the model, the tone, cream, diez, puff, and then gain. High gain is like right. So low is just a little bit. So what did I have it on? Cylinder. So that's just like trust your ears, play around with it. Tone is going to be like brighter, a little bit darker. Fuel is basically the amount setting. So like a whole lot of fuel on the fire or not so much fuel, which I'm modulating that also with some more from caudal. Okay, so that's the flame. And last one is going out to this Joris module here. So let's do that all the way. Let's see if we can. It's definitely more subtle than the flame. But what this is doing, it's kind of splitting the left and right into different channels and adds just a kind of like little shimmering modulation to it. Definitely helps if you're wearing headphones to really tell. And so the type here, there's slightly different modulations to it. How deep is that going to be? Very, very subtle or more extreme? And then the rate would be how fast. Okay, cool. So 4 effects, and so now I can kind of determine with these 4 dials kind of how much of this wind sound do I want to actually send to those. And if I only had one voice, if the wind thing was the only thing I had in the whole patch, maybe I wouldn't bother with doing it as aux effects, because I could control the dry and the wet maybe just manually. But the powerful thing is when we have lots of voices coming in, and we can kind of mix those in different ways. So I think I'm happy with that for now. Like, I guess also I didn't mention the this one here. Also, speaking of the labels, yeah, it's a little bit loud now. This is another module by Submarine called TD202. If we look at brand, oops, come back, Submarine. There we go. So a lot of utility type modules that you kind of have to really look at the manual to understand what's happening with them. But the TD202, which is here somewhere, did I already pass it? It looks like a blank thing, but it's actually a text. Here we go, vertical text display. So these are really handy for just like plop it in there, and then you can add little label on those. So it kind of separates your modules a little bit, and it doesn't take up too much room. Okay, that's good for part 2, I think, and then in the last one I'll kind of talk about what these other voices are doing.